I'm Maddie, and welcome back to Diaries of Farmhouse. I will tell you, I've already filmed this once, and I'm going to film it again really quick. I have about 10 minutes to get through this, so if I talk quick, I am so sorry. I'm always in a rush. I'm always late for something. I don't know, but if you're like me, leave a comment below. Today we're going to talk about propagation. So there's several different ways that you can propagate. I'm only going to list the more common ones and the easier ones, and I'm going to make like a little box over here that you can see. So the more common ways to propagate your plant, and propagation, if you don't know, is creating a new plant from a mother plant or a main plant. In the wild, this helps the plant to survive and spread, and if branches break off, it can continue to grow. If seeds spread, it continues to spread and grow. So these propagation methods are usually ways that plants will survive and grow and spread in the wild. So the more common ways are to take node cuttings, leaf cuttings, to divide the plant, or to use seeds to grow a new plant. So I have a lot of propagations here, all of which are cuttings or leaf cuttings. So when you're taking node cuttings, you usually want to find these little bumps, these little nodes. And in some plants, they grow into air roots, which help the plant to get more stability when it's climbing, but also absorb extra nutrients from the soil. So you can see this one's already got some roots on it. We've got some nodes here. When you're taking these cuttings, you want to cut just below the node or in between. I found that placing these in water are the best way to go. You can also use moss. So I have some moss here. I just use sphagnum moss from Lowe's. And then I wet it and I put the cuttings in it. But this is probably my least favorite method just because the moss sticks to the roots. And then you have to kind of like peel it off before you plant them. I know some people, this is their favorite, but it is my least favorite. But it does work. So I think it works better if you're doing like leaf cuttings. So if you're taking cuttings from peperomias, maybe like succulents, that kind of stuff, this would probably be the better way to go. However, like I said, with node cuttings, I think water is best. Or my most recent favorite is pon. I have some cuttings in pon right here, and they have done really good. So I would say for cuttings, definitely water or pon. The nice thing about pon is you can leave your cutting in there until it's an adult plant or even further. A lot of people just like leave their plants in pon and use it as a substitute for soil. So that's the nice thing about that. I think water propagation doesn't work for everything. Some plants do better than others in water. I have had more luck in water than not. However, there are some things that just won't work. Like, let's move on to leaf cuttings, and I'll talk about that. So leaf cuttings, obviously they're harder to keep in the water without the leaves getting into the water and molding. So that's why they don't work as well. And this works better for cuttings because you can just stick the stem down in there. Or like I have this corn plant cutting in some water. I would say pon or soil or moss would be the best for leaf cuttings. So I have some Burrow's Tail babies right here. And as you can see, they're really tiny. And if I were to put this in the water, it probably would take if I could get it to sit on top of the water. But I would say that it would probably end up molding or rotting. So I keep them in moist soil. I mist the top layer every so often. And that would be like the more common way to propagate succulents too. Is breaking off leaves, putting them in damp soil, misting them every so often until they root. Pon is nice because it retains the moisture and evaporates off the moisture into the cuttings. So you probably could use the same method, putting these little leaves on top of the pond and then just misting it every so often. So division. So I've covered cuttings. I've covered leaf propagation. Leaf propagation, for cuttings, you pretty much have to have a node. There are some exceptions to that. Begonias, they don't have any like visible nodes, but they will produce roots when they're put in water. But they also do have a tendency to rot when they're put in water. So if you're propagating a begonia, I would just keep a close eye on it or use one of these other two methods. Leaf cuttings. This doesn't work with things that are like aroids. Begonias, you can propagate leaves pretty easily. I have done that in my terrariums. But things like pothos, corn plants, maranthas, any of those kinds of plants, you're going to want to either divide or use cuttings. But things like succulents, begonias, snake plants, those kinds of plants, you can definitely take leaves and use the soil method or a pond method would be my top two choices. Or I know people use perlite too. I have not had success in perlite, but if you do use perlite, I'm sure you could use this method for leaf cuttings too. The next thing is division. So when you're dividing a plant, you are essentially going to the root and finding where there are pups or pieces, starters of the plant coming off of the root. And more times than not, they will have their own root system, so you can just break them off and put them directly into soil or some kind of potting medium. This one's probably the easiest method of propagation just because it's already got its own established root system, whereas if you were to use one of these other methods, you would have to transfer it into a potting medium, which can sometimes be kind of tricky. So if I were to rank the ways to propagate, you have pond, leca, perlite, moss, soil, water. I would say my top method is probably water. I have gotten a ton of cuttings this way, and you just have to clear out the water, put new water in every so often, and this has been my most successful method. However, close to second would be pond, just because it's nice that you can leave them in there. You don't have to worry about filling it with water too often. This little cutting is doing great. So that would probably be my close second. And then I would probably say leca would be like my third. I haven't used it very often, but when I have, it's been really successful. My fourth would probably be moss. And then anything after that would be perlite and soil. The tricky thing with soil is that you can propagate these in soil, but you would have to keep it super, super, super moist to encourage root growth. But then that can also encourage bacterial growth and rotting and that kind of stuff. So that's why soil propagation would probably be my least favorite for cuttings. It's good for certain things like for leaf cuttings, but not really for a whole lot of other propagation methods. So I know that was quick. But hopefully it was helpful. And if you have any questions, comments, leave them down below. You can message me on my Instagram at madd.plants, or you could go to my shop page at diariesoffarmhouse.shop. I would love to hear your feedback, or if you want me to talk about something that I may have missed or you're more curious about. I will talk about how to propagate certain plants when I talk about individual plants themselves, so that you can learn how to propagate them in the best way for that plant. But as a general overview, these are a few different ways that you can propagate successfully. And yeah, so if you want to follow me, that would be wonderful. Like and subscribe to this video, it means a lot. And if you're interested in my shop page, we are selling home decor, plant accessories, pet accessories, and plants. Coming in March, we will start selling plants again, so keep your eye on that. If you don't want to miss out on it, go to www.diariesoffarmhouse.com and sign up for our newsletter. That way you don't miss out on any new product launches or when we're going to local farmers markets in Colorado. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!